Coming from Texas, where the wind is blowing constantly at 40 knots, or at least the place where I lived, and it's 105 degrees there at the same time. So pretty tough, just like living in a hairdryer on a constant basis. So we had a great welcoming party. The sheriff's office in Lawrence County was just so good to us. I'm going to write them and say, that's Sheriff Thompson. He's a great man. As I mentioned in class, Brother Gary Mullins, so excited that we're here. He came all the way to Lawrence County to escort us all the way home here. So this is really great. We actually had a breakdown, and that's what happened there. But at any rate, we're just happy to be here. I'm looking forward to working with this congregation, working with you, and working in this community and building up the church, converting people to Christ. And we're just excited to be here. And my wife and I, Anita, are just really pleased that you've invited us to be here, and we count it as the providence of God that we are. I wanted this morning to start with a sermon, and it involves, of course, as you can see, Jeremiah. I was thinking about what is the task of a preacher? What do I expect from myself? What do you expect from me? And what, most importantly, does God expect? That's what I really want to know. What does God expect from one who stands in the pulpit? My mind cast over several passages in the New Testament as well as the Old that really spoke to this particular situation. You might think of passages such as 2 Timothy chapter 4 and verse 2. Preach the word, be instant in season and out of season, reprove, rebuke, exhort with all longsuffering and doctrine. That's a great text. Paul wrote that to young Timothy, the last thing that came from his inspired pen. But he also had this statement to make in 1 Corinthians chapter 9 and verse 16, where he says, if I preach the gospel, I have nothing to glory of. Yea, necessity is laid upon me. Woe is unto me if I preach not the gospel. That passage also is a powerful text about preaching the gospel of Christ. But there's another text from Jeremiah chapter 20. In my mind, it resonated, and it is from Jeremiah chapter 20, where Jeremiah says that the word of God is a fire in my bones, and I cannot contain it any longer. So I thought let's this morning examine some things regarding Jeremiah, basing it on and surrounding it on this particular text. And we will notice, number one, the courage of the prophet, that is the courage that was required, the resolution that he had to have some resolve, the demand of the prophet, that is the demand that he makes upon you and makes upon me, and finally the invitation of the prophet. He was going to have some inviting for us to do, and that will be serving as our own invitation this morning. So let's think about Jeremiah for just a moment. I want to begin with this statement, and this comes from the Cambridge Bible for Schools and Colleges, printed about 150 years ago, pertaining to the life of Jeremiah. And the writer says this, quote, it is difficult to conceive of any situation more painful than that of a great man condemned to witness the lingering agony of an exhausted country, and to witness all signs of vitality disappearing one by one until there's nothing left but coldness, darkness, and corruption. End of quote. I thought that is a perfect summary of the life of Jeremiah. He was condemned to watch the death struggle of Israel. He came to the ministry in 627 BC. You recognize that is about 40 years before the country totally collapsed under pressure from the Babylonians, but that, of course, was sent by God, 586 BC. He was condemned to see that, and he was told at the beginning that he was to preach the message in spite of the fact that he was told also at the beginning and informed that they would not accept what he was going to say, that they would repudiate him and repudiate his message. But he was to preach it anyway. People ask, why do it? Because it is right to do it. That's why. And he preached the message in spite of the fact that the country was going to go totally collapsed. And that's exactly what happened in the time of Jeremiah. couple of things we might notice regarding this prophet. We know more about him than most of the writing prophets in the Old Testament. For example, we know more about his own feelings. He writes some exposures of his own heart, his own mind, and how he felt about his mission, and how he recoiled at it, and he didn't want to participate in it at all. And he even questioned God. He questioned God's providence. He questioned whether God's promises were actually holding true to him or not. We know all of this because he gives us all of these in these passages in Jeremiah where he has all of these self-revelations. And it is so interesting to read how he questioned all of these things. And he questioned whether he should even be preaching or not. But not only so, but we know more about his personal life as far as his suffering is concerned as well. He suffered as much as or more than any other prophet. We are told simply by tradition, for example, that Isaiah was sawn in half. That is by saw. They sawed him in half. That's tradition. It's not Bible. But we know about Jeremiah. Jeremiah was beaten. He was put in the stocks overnight. He was put into a dry cistern. He was put into also a house arrest by Zedekiah the king. He was kidnapped, taken to Egypt, all because he was preaching God's message. And we know so much about Jeremiah because of that. So let's think about that. And as we begin thinking about Jeremiah and the fire in his bones, the preaching of message, I want us first of all to think about the background. Let's see if that does it. Well, it's not going to go through the door, so someone's going to have to... There it is. Okay, there it is. Well, I guess I'll have to go over here and just point it that way. I don't know how it's going to go. We'll see. So let's be acquainted with Jeremiah for just a moment. It's important to see the historical background. Jeremiah was from a small village called Anathoth, which is just 3 miles north by northeast of Jerusalem. It was a priestly village. Remember that in the Old Testament, all of the priests were situated in different villages throughout all of Israel in order that they might teach adequately the people, because they were the teachers of the law. His father was Hilkiah, also a priest. So Jeremiah was actually a priest. He had access to the temple. He was a priest, but most importantly, he was a prophet of God. But what also is essential for understanding the times of Jeremiah is to see he lived and preached under the last 5 kings of Judah. The first king of those 5 would be Josiah. Josiah was a great king. He was the last godly king that they had. He had a great reformatory movement, a reformation, a restoration to the principles of Moses. He came to the throne in 640 BC, but he died in battle in the valley of Megiddo in 609 BC. Now you recognize that Jeremiah came to his ministry when God called him in 627. So Jeremiah was contemporary with Josiah for a short period of time. And Jeremiah had high hopes when Josiah was the king. But he was taken out of the way by the providence of God that he might not see, that as Josiah was, that he might not see the final and total collapse of the country. And when they brought his body back to Jerusalem, there was much lamentation and mourning, and they buried him in the tomb of the kings. Immediately after his death, his son, the next one, is on the left-hand side, and that is Jehoahaz. Jehoahaz reigned only 3 months. We have nothing about him in the book of Jeremiah. 3 months, and he was replaced in 609 also by the second son of Josiah, and his name is Jehoiakim, K-I-M. Jehoiakim was a wicked king. At one point, he took the scroll upon which Jeremiah had written the word of God. He cut it up, threw it into a brazier that was burning in front of him. But he was taken out of the way in 598 BC. Now you might stop for a moment and think about this, that means he was there, that is Jehoiakim, as well as Jeremiah, when the Babylonians took the first wave of captives to Babylon, 606 BC. The second wave went in 598 That was when Jehoiakim dies. The final total collapse, as mentioned, was 586. So Jehoiakim saw the first two waves of captivity. And in those waves of captivity went people such as Ezekiel, Daniel, and they go to Babylon. But Jeremiah is staying home. And he is preaching to the people here. And it is not going to be a very thankful ministry with the people. After Jehoiakim dies, his son, Jehoiakim, comes to the throne. He is called in the book of Jeremiah, Jeconiah, and sometimes, or at least on one occasion, Coniah, just shortened it to Coniah. I like those shortened names. I can understand what we're talking about here because these J names, Jehoiakim, Jehoiakim, Coniah, and he reigns for only 3 months. He is the last legitimate king of Judah, and he is taken to Babylonian captivity in chains. But then we have his uncle, another son of Josiah, Zedekiah, is now installed as a puppet king by the king of Babylon. And Jeremiah would have a lot to do with Zedekiah. As a matter of fact, Zedekiah would say, I want you to come and have a private interview with me. I want you to tell me what to do. And the choice was simply this, and very clear, that Jeremiah gave Zedekiah. Your choice is two. Number one, you give up to the Babylonians. Number two, you die. That's it. Those are the choices you have. He did not give up to the Babylonians, and his death was a horrible end. So that's the backdrop of what we have in Jeremiah. So all of these points that we have are built around the political scene at the time. So let's notice, first of all, then, what we have is the courage of the prophet. By the courage of the prophet, I mean the courage that was required of him. He himself was required to have courage beyond what really was a common measure. Now, courage is something that implies that he's going to have resistance. He's going to have a lot of resistance, and he's going to be reluctant to preach the gospel. Have you thought about that? He was reluctant. He did not want to go preach. Didn't want to do it. I think about reluctance. I can't help but tell the story. I was thinking about my friend Joe Wilkerson, and he told us how he became a Christian. He was in Lubbock area, and Joe Wilkerson had been in the Army. He had been in Special Forces, and he'd been down to, and now he's in law enforcement, and he'd been down to Mexico picking up bad guys and bringing them back. And he was living outside of town in Lubbock. And so they said to Don Hatch was a preacher there in Lubbock. They told Don Hatch, they said, Don, there's a man out here named Joe Wilkerson, and we want to convert him. But Joe was kind of tough as nails guy, so Don says, show me the house. They took him out in the country. Don comes up to the porch. Joe opens the door. Don says, I want to talk to you about Jesus Christ. Joe said, I'm going to give you 5 seconds to get off my porch, or I'm going to knock you off that porch. Don was dressed in a suit. He had a fedora hat. He took his fedora hat, tossed it out in the yard, said, it's been a long time since someone knocked me off the stump. He said, let's go. Joe looked at him and said, all right, I'll give you 5 minutes. So he came in, and before the session was over, Joe was crying. Don had convicted him with the gospel of Christ. Joe became a preacher, and he became a Christian reluctantly. Well, Jeremiah was reluctant, but he was not quite that reluctant. He was reluctant as a preacher. So Jeremiah chapter 1, that's where we are, Jeremiah chapter 1 and verse 5. The word of Jehovah came unto me, saying, before I formed thee in the belly, I knew thee. Before thou camest forth out of the womb, I sanctified you. I have appointed you a prophet unto the nations. Jeremiah said, oh, Lord Jehovah, I know not how to speak. I'm a child. God says, say not, I'm a child. For to whomsoever I send you, you will go. And whatsoever I command you, you will speak. Be not afraid of them. By the way, that's the real cause, isn't it? He is fearful. Be not afraid because of them, for I am with you to deliver you, saith Jehovah. Then he said, I set you over nations, over kingdoms, to pluck up. First of all, he says, the Lord reached forward, touched my mouth, put his words in my mouth, and said, see, I have set thee this day over nations, over kingdoms, to pluck up, to break down, to destroy, and to overthrow. and to build and to plant. There are two things I want you to notice regarding that first initial call of Jeremiah. Number one, preaching the gospel or preaching in the Bible always has its positive and it has its negatives. Did you notice that? Pluck up, break down, destroy, overthrow, and then build and to plant. That's the way it always is. 2 Timothy chapter 4, reprove, rebuke, exhort with all long-suffering and doctrine. There's always the negative, there's always the positive. So that's number one. Number two, he tells Jeremiah, I'm setting you as a prophet over the nations. The nations. Traditionally, through history, kings have said, the law is in my mouth, and that is what I say is God's law. God speaks through me. But we see here that is false. What is actually the highest is the Word of God. And that's exactly what Jeremiah was going to do. Preach the Word of God, and that Word of God is that to which the kings must answer. Kings do not have the law in their mouth. So Jeremiah was told that. Now we have his reception. Go down to verse 16. God says, I will utter my judgments against them in that they have forsaken me. They burnt incense unto the gods, and they worship the works of their own hands. Now therefore, brace yourself. All right, that's a warning right there. Brace yourself. Arise and speak unto them all that I command you. You know what the temptation is? Speak only smooth things, nice things, only things that are acceptable, only things that are palatable. But he says, speak all that I command you. Be not dismayed at them, lest I dismay you before them. Now he tells us, I have made you this day a fortified city, an iron pillar, and bronze walls against the whole land, against the kings of Judah, against the princes thereof, against the priests. Who are the priests? They're the preachers. Against the preachers of the land, and against all the people of the land. And they will fight against you. But I'm with you to deliver you, saith Jehovah. They shall not prevail against you. Jeremiah was told as he began, you're going to have opposition. They're all going to fight against you, and you're going to preach against the preachers of the land. The kings, the princes, the upper crusts of society, and all the preachers, you're going to stand against those. So Jeremiah begins his mission. Jeremiah chapter 1. So he's going to have, number one, some courage in order to do it. Number two, he's going to have some resolution. This comes to Jeremiah chapter 7. Resolution, that means resolve. One of the most famous sermons in the Bible is this one in Jeremiah chapter 7. What happens here? Jeremiah is told to go to the temple. That'd be like going to the church house, standing outside the doors. Go to the church house, stand outside the doors, and he tells them, here's the message you're going to preach. He says, reform your lives and you can stay in this place. If you don't reform, you're going to captivity. Reform your lives, but Jeremiah had already been told they're going to captivity. Reform your lives and you will stay in this place. Don't think that because you come to the church house, the temple, don't think because you come to the temple that is sanctuary, that God is not going to destroy this temple. If you think that, go to Shiloh, where he first put his name, as the tabernacle was first established. Go to Shiloh and see what I did there. It is in ruins. The Philistines had destroyed it many years before. Go to Shiloh. Jeremiah blamed primarily the leaders in verse 6. But he says, here's what you're saying, the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord. Don't think that coming to the temple is sanctioned against God's wrath because you have lived disobediently to Him. Well, that got the attention of the people that were coming to worship. Can you imagine coming to worship and hearing that sermon? If I were to stand outside, I'd say, well, the sermon's going to be right here on the sidewalk today. And this is how it's going to go. That's how it was. But the attention was also in a house nearby, and that was Jehoiakim. Because it was in his reign, and Jehoiakim says, we're going to kill that man. He had a chronicler that was with him. His name was Ahikam. Ahikam said, no, don't kill Jeremiah. It'll be all right. He had already killed a couple of people. couple of the prophets who said things he didn't like, but he was going to kill Jeremiah. But now here we have this one in chapter 19. Jeremiah said, God told him rather, go to the potter's house and buy a clay pot. And I want you to take the leaders of the people out to the valley of Hinnom. All of the leaders, the princes. Remember, he was going to talk about and against the princes. He said, take this pot out there, and I want you to cast it down and break it in front of them. And here's the message you're to give. As I broke this pot and it cannot be made whole again, I will break this people and it will not be made whole again. Would that premillennial people would read this particular text, or people who believe that Israel somehow is going to be refurbished in the future? Jeremiah is clear as a bell. It's going to be broken and cannot be made whole again. Well, the repercussions are very quick in coming. His own people of Anathoth, people in his own family, just a village up the road, they said, we're going to kill him. We're going to kill him. Those are too hard of messages. And they laid a plot against his life. That was discouraging to Jeremiah. Not only so, but now he hears the word that Jehoiakim was going to kill him. So now we have the first confession of Jeremiah chapter 12. And I want you to listen to what he has to say. Jeremiah chapter 12, beginning in verse 1. He says, you're always righteous, Lord, whenever I bring a case before you. Yet I will speak with you about your justice. Why do the wicked prosper and all the wicked live at ease and the unrighteous live at ease? He says, you planted them, speaking to God, you planted them and they've taken root. They grow, they bring forth fruit. But I want you to know you're near in their mouth, but you're far from their heart. Now here's what Jeremiah's personal feelings, he come out here in verse 4. He says, pull them out like sheep for the slaughter. Prepare them for the day of slaughter. He's ready for this to be done with. How long will the land mourn and the herbs of the whole country wither? Because of the wickedness of them that live therein, the beasts are consumed and the birds. And moreover, they're saying, he doesn't care what happens to us. He's telling God, they don't pay attention to what you're doing at all. What is God's answer to him? One of the famous texts of Jeremiah. If you have run with the footmen, Jeremiah, and they have wearied you, how are you going to contend with the horses? And if you stumble in smooth and safe country, what are you going to do in the thickets of the Jordan? In other words, you better buckle up. It's going to get tougher than this. But Jeremiah was ready for them to be done with, all of them right now. Not only that, but he had opposition from without and within. For example, Pashur was one of the priests who was the overseer of the temple. Pashur had Jeremiah, after that sermon in chapter 19, said, put him in stocks. Put him in the stocks overnight. Let him go the next day, said, you go on your way and you don't pay attention to any more of that kind of preaching. No more of that. Then we have Hananiah, chapter 28. Hananiah was a false preacher. Hananiah met Jeremiah. Jeremiah came into the town. He was wearing a wooden yoke. Said, here's what you're going to do. Here's the people of Israel. They're going to be in a yoke of the king of Babylon. I'm begging you to change your lives. Hananiah was so angry, he took that yoke, ripped it off his neck, and he broke it. God's told Jeremiah, I said, you tell him he's going to have an iron yoke. That's what's going to happen to him. Not only that, but he had opposition even in Babylon. Remember, there were people in Babylon already. Many Israelites are there in captivity. Daniel, Ezekiel, they're already over there. And one of them was named, a false preacher by the name of Shemaiah. Jeremiah wrote a letter to the captives in Babylon saying, settle down, make your houses and homes, you're going to be there 70 years. They were saying, no. Hananiah had even said, no, only 2 years. Shemaiah was saying, only 2 years and we're going to go home. Jeremiah said, no, you're going to be there 70 years. So Shemaiah wrote a letter back. He wrote it to Zephaniah. We'll have a quiz on all these names later. He wrote a letter to Zephaniah, said, Zephaniah, shut him up over there. He's discouraging the people here. He's telling us we'll be here 70 years. Fortunately, Zephaniah was friends with Jeremiah, and he came and showed him the letter that had been written back. He was opposed by that as well. Later in chapter 37, Jeremiah was kidnapped He was kidnapped by people who run into Egypt. Everywhere he turned, he was opposed one after the other. And that comes to this particular text in chapter 20, verses 7 through 9 that was read in your hearing earlier. So, oh Jehovah, here's Jeremiah. This is his own feelings. Oh Jehovah, you persuaded me and I was persuaded. You called me to the sermon. You called me to preach. You persuaded me, I was persuaded. You're stronger than I and you prevailed, but I'm becoming a laughingstock all the day. Everyone mocks me. And as often as I speak, I cry out violence and destruction. And the word of Jehovah has become a reproach unto me and a derision all the day. And if I say I will not make mention of him, his inner thoughts, or speak any more in his name, there is in my heart, as it were, a burning fire shut up in my bones, and I cannot forbear it anymore. I cannot contain it. Boy, there is Jeremiah. I want to shut my mouth, but I cannot shut my mouth. I'm going to speak the word of God. Boy, I tell you, Jeremiah is a great epitome of a preacher today, or what should be preaching today. Let's consider also not only the resolution of the prophet. Let's go on to the next, which is the demand of the prophet. There it is, the demand of the prophet, Jeremiah chapter 2. Jeremiah chapter 2, verses 10 through 12. One of the interesting texts is set here in chapter 2, where Jeremiah sets it up like a courtroom scene. You've been in courts, you've seen how it works. God is the judge. God is also the prosecuting attorney, or prosecutor, I should say, and the attorney for him is Jeremiah. The people are the defendants. And so that's how it works. He's lined it all up. And he says this, beginning in verse 4, what wrong has your fathers seen in me that they've turned away from me? That is to say, they've been apostate a long time. He blames it upon their leaders once again in verse 7. But finally we come to verses 10 through 12, and he says this, I want you to pass over to the Isle of Kittim, which is Cyprus. Just go off to see Cyprus and consider. Send unto Kedar, that's way over to the east, that's the west, now to the east, and consider diligently, has there been such a thing? Here's Jeremiah in the courtroom. Has there been such a thing? What's he talking about? Has a nation changed its gods, which are no gods? Yet my people have changed their glory for that which does not profit. Now he's going to bring to bear a witness, and the witness is the heavens. Consider, O heavens, diligently, and be horrified. Has a nation changed its gods, which are yet no gods? My people have changed their glory for that which does not profit. Then he tells us this, my people have forsaken me, the fountain of living waters, and dug for themselves cisterns, dry cisterns, which can hold no water. Let's go back to that phrase, has a nation changed its gods, which are yet no gods? But my people have changed their glory for that which does not profit. Have you ever noticed, it is the case that the Lord's people apostatize through generations, one generation after the other. Even today, the Lord's church, the churches of Christ, are dwindling in number. At the same time, false religions continue to grow. Why is that the case? How is that the case? Why is it the case that God's people have apostatized in so many places? And that we're seeing churches dwindle and close their doors. At the same time, just for example, you see religions such as Islam. Islam growing continually by leaps and bounds. Continues to grow. Why is that the case? How is that the case? The answer is right here. And that is to say that when men craft a religion after their own desires and their own wicked hearts, such as Islam, it's very easy to be faithful to those religions because they have not called you higher at all. Islam endorses adultery. It endorses lying, taqiyya, that's the official doctrine, taqiyya, lying. It endorses killing and murder. That's how Muhammad established the religion. It's easy for the people to follow a religion that was crafted out of their own desires, out of their own heart. It doesn't call anyone higher, but it is only God's religion that calls us higher and steps us up to God. And that's why we have, for example, in passages such as 1 Peter chapter 1 and verse 13, he says, gird up the loins of your mind. Set your hope perfectly on the grace that is brought unto you at the revelation of Jesus Christ, as children of obedience, not fashioning yourselves according to your former lusts, but as he who called you is holy, be you also holy, because it is written, you shall be holy because I'm holy. Only the one God of the universe calls us higher to match him and to become holy as he is holy. The religions of man, even those who claim to follow Christ, do not call people higher. They simply are crafted out of their own imaginations and of their own desires, and it is very easy to follow those religions. Christianity calls you higher, and Jeremiah said the same exact thing. Instead of going to the fountain of living waters, people want to craft for themselves or dig for themselves cisterns, dry cisterns that can hold no water. But now we have the final, and that is the invitation of the prophet. And the invitation of the prophet is Jeremiah, well, let's see here. It's in Jeremiah chapter 8. He gives an invitation to all of us. I'm going to use it for our invitation as well. And that is this. So think about, let's just back up for a moment and think about the map of Palestine, the map of Israel. Just how is the map situated? What does it look like? What does the map of Israel look like? You're looking at it from the top, and the map of Israel is this. You have in the center of it a deep cleft. That is the Jordan Valley. The Jordan River flows through it. And it comes to the lowest spot on the crust of the earth, the Dead Sea. That is over 1,300 feet below sea level, and it's only about 40 miles to the west that you have sea level, the Mediterranean Sea. But that means that on either side of the Jordan Valley there are mountainous regions, and so Jerusalem sits about 2,000 to 2,200 feet above sea level. If you're going to go to the east, you're going to climb up on the top of the mountain ridges. There are three streams that flow from those mountain ridges into the Jordan Valley. They are the Yarmouk River, the far north, flowing from east to west, dropping down into the valley. The Jabbok River, which is in the center, flowing down, dropping right into the Jordan Valley again. And then finally the Arnon River, which is the very southern edge, flowing itself into the Dead Sea. It is in the Jabbok River area that was known in the Old Testament time as Gilead. That was the territory of Gilead. And Gilead was famous for a particular tree that grew there because the tree, it was only in that area, only in that region, but it had a particular rosin that you could pull and extract out of the tree, and you can use it for medicinal purposes. For example, Pliny was an old Roman historian. He said, he called it the balm of Gilead. Jeremiah is going to use the same thing here. The balm that comes out of Gilead, the rosin that comes out of the tree, he said it can be used for respiratory problems, digestive problems. He said even you put it on your head and grow some hair. I thought, well, maybe I need some of that, but I thought I'd give my brother Scott the first shot at it. The balm of Gilead, it was just an all-around medicinal cure. And that's exactly what Jeremiah uses, the balm of Gilead, as he invites the people to him. He says, why have they provoked me to anger with their foreign vanities and with their idols? The harvest is past, the summer is ended, and we are not saved. For the hurt of the daughter of my people am I hurt. I mourn. Dismay has taken hold on me. Is there no balm in Gilead? Is there no medicine there? Why then is not the health of the daughter of my people recovered? Oh, that my head were waters, my eyes a fountain of tears. I would weep day and night for the slain daughter of my people. The point is that balm of Gilead, that is the soothing grace of God, is there, But people have refused God's way. The balm of Gilead is that which is Jeremiah's invitation, and it is our invitation today. The balm of Gilead is available to all. Unfortunately, so many people try to make it on their own. They don't want the balm, the spiritual healing that we have only in God, the balm of Gilead. If the lesson is yours, in the sense that you want to respond to the invitation, we want you to come to the front in just a moment while we stand and sing. If you're not a Christian by belief, repentance, baptism into Christ, God adds you to His family. If you want spiritual healing from the balm of Gilead, we'll pray with you and for you. Come right now while we stand and sing if you're subject to the invitation.